Afghanistan, 2013. Dawn broke across the Hindu Kush mountains, painting the jagged peaks in amber and gold. The valley below remained shrouded in shadow, a darkness that concealed both death and desperation. Staff Sergeant Rick Martinez pressed himself against the cold stone of a half-collapsed wall, his Delta Force unit scattered around him in whatever cover they could find. 40 Taliban fighters had them surrounded, closing in from three sides, their only escape route cut off by a sheer cliff face. "Thunder 6, this is Echo Actual," Martinez whispered urgently into his radio, keeping his voice low despite the panic rising in his chest. "We are pinned down at grid coordinates 37945. Heavy enemy presence. No extraction point. Request immediate air support." The radio crackled. "Echo, Actual, this is Thunder 6. No air assets available in your sector. Cloud cover too thick. Nearest QRF is 20 mics out. Hold position." Martinez closed his eyes briefly. 20 minutes. They wouldn't last 5. "Sir," his communications specialist whispered, blood trickling from a gash across his forehead. "We're not getting out of this one, are we?" Before Martinez could answer, his earpiece crackled again. A new voice, calm and measured. "Echo. Actual, this is Phantom. Hold your position. I have eyes on target. Preparing to engage." Martinez frowned. Phantom wasn't a call sign he recognized. And what did they mean by eyes on target? The nearest high ground with a line of sight to their position had to be. He scanned the distant ridgeline, squinting against the rising sun. Nearly 4 kilometers away, a solitary figure lay prone on an outcropping of rock so still they might have been part of the mountain itself. Through a specialized Barrett M82A1 scope, Ashley Carter monitored her breathing, slowing her heart rate to barely 50 beats per minute. The distance to target 3,827 meters. Wind speed variable 3 or 7 mph shifting east. Temperature differential between her position and the valley approximately 20 degrees. Humidity 22%. Barometric pressure 24.67 in/G. She made the calculations, automatically adjusting her scope with minute precision. This shot would not just push the boundaries of ballistics. It would shatter them. At this distance, her bullet would take nearly 7 seconds to reach its target. 7 seconds, during which anything could change. As the sun continued to rise behind her, Ashley Carter placed her finger on the trigger and exhaled. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. 3 months earlier. The armory was a sanctuary of ordered silence. The rhythmic hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the faint scent of gun oil and metal, the precise rows of weaponry in their racks, it all created a world apart from the chaos beyond these walls. And that was exactly how Ashley Carter preferred it. She sat at a workbench in the far corner, her focus entirely on the disassembled M2010 enhanced sniper rifle laid out before her. Bolt receiver, barrel, magazine stock, all arranged in perfect alignment. Each component gleamed under the harsh light, testament to hours of meticulous cleaning and care. Carter moved with practiced precision, her hands steady, as she inspected the bolt face for carbon buildup. She dabbed a small amount of oil onto a cloth and ran it along the bolt's surface, checking for any imperfection that might compromise accuracy. To an observer, it might have appeared as simple maintenance. To Carter, it was meditation. At 35, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found their purpose early and pursued it relentlessly. Her service record spoke volumes. Distinguished marksman in the United States Marine Corps, 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, 18 confirmed kills at distances exceeding 1,500 meters. Now an instructor at Fort Bragg's Advanced Marksmanship Unit, she was respected by her peers, at least most of them. The armory door swung open, breaking the silence. Carter didn't look up. The heavy footfalls and boisterous voices told her everything she needed to know. "Well, would you look at that?" a voice drawled deliberately loud. "Little Miss Perfect is polishing her toys again." Lieutenant Colonel Blake Morrison stood in the doorway, flanked by 3 other instructors. At 42, Morrison was an imposing figure, 6'3", broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair, and the weathered face of a man who had spent too many years in harsh environments. His 15 years as a Navy SEAL had earned him a certain swagger that seemed to fill whatever room he entered. Carter continued her work, acting as if she hadn't heard. This was a familiar routine. "You know, I sometimes wonder why we even let women handle these weapons," Morrison continued, stepping into the room. "Especially the long-range systems. It's not just about pulling a trigger. There's physics involved. Complex calculations." The men behind him chuckled on cue. "And then there's the physical aspect. Hauling gear through rough terrain for days, remaining absolutely still for hours. Not exactly suited to the fairer sex, is it?" Carter aligned the bolt with the receiver, sliding it home with a satisfying click. She still didn't look up. Her silence was not timidity, it was control. Morrison wanted a reaction. He wouldn't get one. "Hey, I'm talking to you, Carter." Morrison's voice hardened as he approached her workbench. "The least you could do is acknowledge your superior officer." Finally, Carter raised her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. "Is there something you need, Colonel Morrison? I'm in the middle of the maintenance." "Just making conversation, sharing some professional observations." He leaned against her workbench, deliberately invading her space. "Tell me, what's the longest confirmed kill you've made in the field? Not on a range with perfect conditions. In combat." 1748 meters, Helmand Province, 2010. Morrison raised an eyebrow, genuine surprise flickering across his features before he masked it. "Impressive, for a woman. But let's be honest, you've never had to make the really hard calls. The kinds of shots that separate the legends from the lucky." He turned to his audience. "Gentlemen, did I ever tell you about the time in Fallujah when I had to take out a high-value target through a sandstorm 200 meters with wind speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour? Had to calculate bullet drift like solving a damn calculus problem." The men nodded appreciatively, though none seemed particularly impressed. Morrison's stories grew taller with each telling. "The point is," he continued, turning back to Carter, "there's a reason why all the record holders for long-distance kills are men. When it comes to the extreme edge of what's possible, women simply don't have what it takes. Biologically, psychologically, it's just science." Carter reassembled the rifle's scope mount, tightening each screw with precise torque. Her face remained impassive, but her knuckles had whitened slightly around the torque wrench. "With all due respect, sir," she said quietly, "science also said humans couldn't break the 4-minute mile until Roger Bannister did it." Morrison's expression darkened. "Cute analogy. But this isn't track and field. This is warfare. Lives depend on the shooter's abilities, and I wouldn't trust a female sniper with any shot over 1,000 meters in actual combat conditions. The stress, the pressure, it's too much." He was building toward something, Carter realized. This wasn't just the usual harassment. Morrison had an agenda today. In fact, he continued, his voice rising so the entire armory could hear, "I'd bet my entire month's pay that you couldn't hit a target at 2,000 meters in variable conditions. Not with all the training in the world." The challenge hung in the air. Several other armorers and instructors had paused their work, watching the confrontation unfold. Carter felt their eyes on her, some curious, some sympathetic, others clearly aligned with Morrison's view. Before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "What about 3,807 meters?" The room went completely still. All heads turned toward the armory entrance. Master Sergeant James Iron Eyes McCoy stood in the doorway, his weathered frame silhouetted against the light from the hallway. At 62, McCoy was a living legend in military circles, one of the original phantom snipers who had operated along the east-west German border during the height of the Cold War. His exploits were classified spoken of only in whispers among those with the highest security clearances. McCoy moved into the room with the deliberate ease of a man who had nothing to prove to anyone. His face was a topographical map of experience, deep lines etched around piercing blue eyes that had seen more than most could imagine. A faint scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, a souvenir from an operation no one dared ask about. "Master Sergeant McCoy," Morrison straightened immediately, his tone shifting to one of deference. McCoy's reputation demanded it. "We weren't expecting you until next week." McCoy ignored him, walking directly to Carter's workbench. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze assessing, but not judgmental. "I asked a question," McCoy said, his voice carrying the slight gravel of age and too many cigarettes. 3,827 meters. Could you hit it? The room remained silent. Everyone present understood the significance of that number. The current world record for the longest confirmed sniper kill was just over 3,500 meters. What McCoy was suggesting went beyond record-breaking. It approached the impossible. Carter met the old sniper's gaze. She sensed this wasn't a taunt or a trap. It was a genuine question. "With the right conditions and equipment," she said carefully, "anything is theoretically possible." McCoy's weathered face remained unreadable. "That's not what I asked. I didn't ask if it's possible in theory. I asked if you could do it." Carter considered her answer carefully. Bravado would be as inappropriate as false modesty. "I don't know," she said finally. "No one does until they try." A ghost of a smile touched McCoy's lips. "Good answer." Morrison stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with being sidelined. "With all due respect, Master Sergeant, we're discussing realistic combat scenarios, not theoretical extremes. The practical limit for effective sniping is around 2,000 meters, even with the best equipment." McCoy didn't even glance at Morrison. His focus remained entirely on Carter. "Finish your maintenance, then meet me at the officers' mess in an hour." It wasn't a request. With that, he turned and left the armory, his departure as abrupt as his arrival. In his wake, Morrison's face had flushed dark red. "Don't let that old man fill your head with fantasies, Carter," he said, his voice low and tight. "He's been out of active service for decades. Things have changed." Carter returned to reassembling her rifle, her movements as precise as before. But something had shifted inside her. McCoy's question had awakened something, a curiosity, a hunger she thought she'd buried years ago. "Colonel Morrison," she said, looking up at him, "what exactly are you afraid of?" The question caught him off guard. For a moment, genuine surprise flashed across his face before hardening into anger. Without another word, he turned and stormed out, his entourage trailing behind him. Carter finished reassembling the rifle, her mind already racing with calculations and possibilities. 3,827 meters. Almost 4 kilometers. Was it even possible? An hour later, Carter found McCoy sitting alone at a corner table in the officers' mess, nursing a cup of black coffee. The lunch rush had ended, leaving the space relatively quiet. McCoy gestured to the chair across from him. "Your reputation precedes you, Sergeant Carter," McCoy said as she sat down. "They call you the Ghost behind your back. Did you know that—" Carter didn't respond. Nicknames meant nothing to her. "They say you never miss, that you can calculate windage adjustments in your head faster than a computer." that you once took out 3 targets in under 40 seconds, at varying distances without adjusting your scope. People exaggerate, Carter replied, keeping her voice neutral. McCoy studied her for a moment. Maybe, but your record doesn't lie. 18 confirmed kills at extreme distances, top scores in every marksmanship course you've ever taken. And yet, I'm still just an instructor not in the field where I belong. Carter finished for him. Is that where this is going? Where do you think it's going? McCoy asked, his blue eyes sharp, despite his age. Carter decided to cut through the verbal sparring. Why did you ask me about 3.827 meters? That's beyond any confirmed kill in military history. McCoy smiled slightly. Not officially confirmed, perhaps. He took a sip of his coffee, letting the implication hang in the air. Tell me about Montana. The abrupt change of subject caught Carter off guard. What about it? That's where you grew up, isn't it? Your father was a hunting guide in the Bitterroot Mountains. Taught you to shoot when you were, 8 years old? Carter's eyes narrowed. You've read my file. I've read more than your file, McCoy said. I know your father was Army Rangers, served in Grenada, received a Purple Heart and a Silver Star for actions that remain partially classified, died in a hunting accident when you were 17. Carter felt a cold tightness in her chest. Few people knew those details. What exactly do you want from me, Master Sergeant? McCoy leaned forward, lowering his voice. What if I told you the hunting accident wasn't an accident? The world seemed to still around Carter. The ambient noise of the mess hall faded away. What are you saying? Not here. McCoy glanced around, then slid a small key across the table. Training Building C, Room 237. 1 hour. Come alone. He stood, nodded once, and walked away, leaving his coffee half-finished. Carter sat motionless, staring at the key. Her mind raced through memories of her father, his patient instruction as he taught her to shoot his quiet pride. When she hit her first target at 500 yards, his final words to her as he lay in a hospital bed, blood seeping through bandages from what everyone called a tragic hunting accident. Promise me, Ashley. Promise me you'll become the best. No matter what they tell you, no matter who stands in your way. You have a gift. Don't let anyone take it from you. She had attributed his intensity to the pain medication, the trauma of the accident. But what if there had been more to it? Building C was one of the older structures on base, used primarily for specialized classroom training. At exactly 1400 hours, Carter unlocked room 237 and stepped inside. The windows had been covered with blackout material, and the only illumination came from a projector displaying a series of images on the far wall. McCoy stood beside the projector, his face half illuminated by its glow. Another man sat at a desk near the front of the room, Colonel William Hargrove, the base commander. His presence surprised Carter. Whatever this was, it had high-level authorization. "Close the door, Sergeant," Hargrove said, his tone formal. "What you're about to hear is classified top secret. It does not leave this room." Carter closed the door and moved to stand at parade rest before the two men. "At ease, Carter," McCoy said. "Have a seat." She sat in the nearest chair, eyes drawn to the projected image, a satellite photograph of what appeared to be a remote mountain range. "Tell me what you know about Project Olympus," McCoy said, watching her reaction carefully. Carter shook her head. "Nothing, sir. Never heard of it. Good, because officially it doesn't exist." McCoy clicked to the next slide, a technical diagram of what looked like an advanced sniper rifle system. In 1981, at the height of the Cold War, DARPA began a classified program to develop extreme long-range precision targeting capabilities. The goal was to create a system and train operators capable of eliminating high-value targets at distances previously considered impossible. Another click, another image. This one showing a much younger McCoy, in specialized cold-weather gear, holding a rifle unlike any Carter had seen before. "I was one of the first test subjects," McCoy continued. "We operated primarily along the East German border, conducting operations that remain classified to this day. The program had limited success. We achieved confirmed kills at ranges up to 2,700 meters, revolutionary for that time. But then something happened." His expression darkened as he changed to the next slide. The image showed an older man, perhaps in his late 50s, with steel-gray hair and cold eyes that seemed to pierce through the photograph. This is Ivan Volkov, former KGB, later FSB. During the Cold War, he was their foremost sniper and sniper instructor. We have confirmation of at least 32 kills attributed to him personally at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. In 1989, intelligence suggested he had been killed during an operation in Berlin. Hargrove spoke up. But recent intelligence indicates Volkov is very much alive, and he's training a new generation of long-range specialists for a non-state actor we've been tracking. Carter studied the image of Volkov. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, though she was certain she had never seen him before. "What does this have to do with me?" she asked. McCoy exchanged a glance with Hargrove, who nodded slightly. "We're reactivating Project Olympus," McCoy said. "With new technology, new methodologies, but we need the right operator. Someone with exceptional natural talent, mathematical aptitude, and psychological resilience. Your name came up repeatedly in our search." Carter's mind was racing. "And the 3827 meters you mentioned earlier, that's the operational requirement," Hargrove said bluntly. "Our intelligence indicates Volkov has developed a methodology for accurate firing at ranges approaching 4 kilometers. We need to match and exceed that capability." "With all due respect, sir, that's beyond the physical limitations of ballistics," Carter said. "At that distance, you're dealing with the Coriolis effect, atmospheric refraction, and bullet drop measured in dozens of meters. Not to mention the 7-second flight time, during which any number of variables could change." McCoy smiled faintly. "And yet, you've already calculated all of that, haven't you, in your head just now?" Carter didn't deny it. She had always had an intuitive grasp of ballistic mathematics. It was like music to her, a natural harmony of numbers and physical forces. "If anyone can do it, you can," McCoy said simply, "but there's a complication." "Morrison," Carter guessed. Hargrove nodded. "Lieutenant Colonel Morrison has considerable political influence. He's been vocal in his opposition to women in certain combat roles, particularly special operations. He's also been designated as the security liaison for Project Olympus due to his SEAL background. He'll do everything in his power to see you fail," McCoy added. "And he has allies throughout the chain of command." Carter processed this information. "Why tell me about my father? What does he have to do with this?" McCoy's expression grew grave. "Your father wasn't just Rangers. After Grenada, he was recruited into a specialized intelligence unit. During the late 1980s, he was part of an operation tracking Volkov's activities in Western Europe." Carter felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. All these years, she had believed her father was simply a decorated ranger who had returned to civilian life to raise his daughter in Montana after her mother died. The idea that he had been involved in covert operations changed everything and explained the fragments of memory that had never quite made sense to her. "Are you saying Volkov killed my father 15 years after the Cold War ended?" McCoy hesitated. "We don't have definitive proof, but the circumstances of your father's death match Volkov's methodology. A single shot from extreme long range made to look like an accident. no shell casing ever found. And your father had recently contacted his former handler, claiming he had information about active Cold War operatives who had gone off-grid. The room seemed to close in around Carter. Her father's last words took on new meaning. He hadn't been delirious from pain medication. He had been trying to tell her something. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady, despite the emotions churning inside her. "Whatever this Project Olympus entails, I'm in." Hargrove studied her with a calculating gaze. "This isn't about personal vendetta, Sergeant. The mission requires absolute emotional control." "With respect, sir, that's exactly what you'll get from me," Carter replied. "I don't operate on emotion. I never have." McCoy nodded approvingly. "Before we proceed, we need to assess your current capabilities under stress. Tomorrow morning, 0600, at the long-range facility. Colonel Morrison will be there as an official observer. He's expecting a standard qualification exercise." "But it won't be standard, will it?" Carter asked. "No," McCoy confirmed. "It will be a test of your limits, and more importantly, a test of how you handle Morrison's inevitable attempts to undermine you." The following morning dawned clear and cold, with a stiff breeze that would challenge even experienced marksmen. Carter arrived at the long-range facility 15 minutes early, her personal gear meticulously prepared. The range stretched out before her target positions, marked at intervals from 300 meters to the maximum visual range of just over 2,000 meters. Morrison was already there, surrounded by a group of senior instructors and range officers. His expression darkened when he saw Carter. "Sergeant Carter!" he called out, his voice carrying across the empty range. "So good of you to join us. I was just explaining to these gentlemen that today's exercise will demonstrate the practical limitations of female operators in extreme conditions." Carter ignored the bait, focusing instead on unpacking her equipment. She had brought her personal weapon, an M2010 she had modified extensively over the years. Every component was familiar to her, adjusted to her specifications through thousands of hours of practice and field use. Morrison approached, hands clasped behind his back. "I've taken the liberty of modifying the course of fire," he said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. "Instead of the standard qualification targets, you'll be engaging reactive steel at extended ranges. Wind conditions are challenging today. What a shame." "Thank you for your concern, Colonel," Carter replied evenly, continuing her preparations. McCoy arrived moments later, accompanied by Colonel Hargrove, and a woman Carter didn't recognize, a civilian judging by her clothing with the alert, analytical gaze of a scientist. "Master Sergeant," Morrison acknowledged McCoy stiffly. "Colonel Hargrove, I wasn't aware you would be observing today." "Just keeping my finger on the pulse of our training programs, Colonel," Hargrove replied smoothly. "And this is Dr. Lisa Wong from DARPA. She's evaluating our long-range capabilities for a research paper." Wong offered a polite nod, but said nothing. Carter suspected her role was far more significant than Morrison was being told. The range officer called the course of fire. Standard qualification, first targets at 300, 600, 800, and 1,000 meters. Carter executed flawlessly, hitting each target center mass with mechanical precision. Morrison watched with poorly concealed displeasure. "Not bad, Sergeant," he conceded when she finished. "But anyone can hit stationary targets in controlled conditions. Let's see how you handle something more dynamic." He nodded to the range officer, who spoke into his radio. Moments later, a series of moving targets appeared at the 1,200-meter mark, small steel plates mounted on a track system moving laterally at varying speeds. 10 targets, Morrison explained. 10 rounds. Time limit 30 seconds. Standard qualification requires 7 hits. Expert qualification requires 9. Carter nodded and took her position again. The challenge was significant. Calculating lead for moving targets at this distance required split-second mathematics, adjusting for both bullet flight time and target movement speed. "Begin," the range officer called. Carter's world narrowed to her scope. Breath control. Trigger squeeze. Follow through. The familiar rhythm of precision marksmanship took over. Each shot was its own universe of calculation and execution. 10 shots. 10 distinct metallic rings as bullets found their targets. Perfect score. 26 seconds. A murmur ran through the observing officers. Even Morrison looked momentarily taken aback before his expression hardened again. "Impressive," he admitted grudgingly. "But let's see how you handle true long-range work." Set up at firing position Alpha. Position Alpha was situated on an elevated platform that provided a clear line of sight to the furthest targets, steel plates positioned at 1,500, 1,750, and the maximum range of 2,000 meters. At these distances, every variable became exponentially more significant. Wind speed, temperature, barometric pressure, even the Earth's rotation had to be accounted for. 3 targets, Morrison announced. 3 rounds, no time limit, but you must declare your shot before firing. He smiled thinly. And to make things interesting, I'll be adjusting the environmental conditions between shots. Carter understood what he meant. The range was equipped with industrial fans that could simulate varying wind conditions. By changing these between shots, Morrison could force her to recalculate entirely for each target. She took her position going through her mental checklist. Current wind, 8 mph gusting to 12 from her 4 o'clock. Temperature 48 degrees. Humidity 62%. Barometric pressure 30.112 in Hg. Distance to first target 500 meters. Carter made her adjustments, dialing in her scope with precise movements. "Ready on target 1, she declared. "Send it." The range officer responded. Inhale, half exhale, pause, squeeze. The rifle's report echoed across the range. 1.8 seconds later, the steel plate rang out as the bullet found its mark dead center. "Hit!" the spotter confirmed. Morrison immediately activated the wind system, cranking it to maximum. Powerful fans created a crosswind that bent the range flags horizontally. "Whenever you're ready for target 2, Sergeant," he said, unable to keep the smugness from his voice. "Wind's picking up a bit." Carter recalculated. The wind was now approximately 25 mph from her 3 o'clock, a brutal crosswind that would push her bullet several meters off course at the 1,750-meter distance of the second target. She dialed her scope adjustments with careful precision. "Ready on target 2, she declared. "Send it," the range officer called. Carter fired, compensating slightly for a last-second gust. The bullet sailed downrange, fighting against the powerful crosswind for nearly 3 seconds before striking the steel plate with a sharp ping. "Hit," the spotter confirmed, a note of surprise in his voice. Morrison's jaw tightened. Without a word, he adjusted not only the wind system, but also activated the range's environmental controls. Temperature regulators began pumping heated air across the range, creating a mirage effect, heat waves that would distort her view through the scope and complicate her ability to judge distance accurately. "Final target," Morrison said. 2,000 meters, maximum range for this facility. Wind and temperature conditions, variable." Carter knew what he was doing. By creating unstable, shifting conditions, he was introducing elements that couldn't be precisely calculated. This wasn't just a test of marksmanship, it was a test of adaptability and instinct. She studied the conditions carefully. The wind was shifting between 15 and 30 mph, changing direction subtly. The temperature difference between her position and the target was creating a pronounced mirage effect. These were the kinds of conditions that separated theoretical knowledge from true mastery. Carter made her initial adjustments, then paused, watching the mirage through her scope. There was a pattern to the chaos, a rhythm to the changes that reminded her of something her father had taught her years ago. The wind has a voice, he had told her. Learn to listen to it, not just measure it. Feel its pattern. She closed her eyes briefly, focusing on the sensation of the wind against her skin, correlating it with what she had observed through the scope. When she opened her eyes again, she made one final subtle adjustment. "Ready on target 3, she declared. "Send it," the range officer responded. Carter squeezed the trigger, the rifle bucking against her shoulder. The shot echoed across the range, followed by nearly 4 seconds of tense silence. Then, "Hit," the spotter announced, a clear note of awe in his voice. "Center mass." A stunned silence fell over the range. Even Morrison seemed momentarily at a loss for words. McCoy stepped forward. "Congratulations, Sergeant Carter. That was exceptional shooting." Morrison recovered quickly. "Lucky shot," he muttered, though not quite quietly enough. "Wind probably changed in her favor at the last second." "Is that so, Colonel?" McCoy asked mildly. "Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the proper technique." Morrison's face flushed. "I don't need to prove myself on a range." "Of course not," McCoy agreed, his tone deliberately neutral. "Few of us could match what we've just witnessed." He turned to Hargrove and Wong. "I believe we've seen enough to make our assessment." Hargrove nodded. "Sergeant Carter, report to my office at 1400 hours. We have matters to discuss." He glanced at Morrison. "You as well, Colonel." As the group dispersed, Morrison approached Carter, his voice low and threatening. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this isn't over. McCoy may think you're special, but I know better. When it comes to real combat conditions, theory and range performance mean nothing." Carter met his gaze steadily. "Is there something specific you're afraid of, Colonel? Or is it just change in general that frightens you?" His eyes narrowed. "Watch yourself, Sergeant. Accidents happen in this line of work, even to so-called naturals." Before Carter could respond, McCoy appeared at her side. "Problem, Colonel?" Morrison straightened. "No problem, Master Sergeant. Just offering some professional advice." "How generous of you," McCoy replied dryly. "If you're finished, I need a moment with Sergeant Carter." Morrison stalked away, the rigid set of his shoulders betraying his anger. "He'll be trouble," McCoy said quietly, once Morrison was out of earshot. "More than you realize. He has connections in places that matter, and he genuinely believes women have no place in special operations." "He's not the first man to underestimate me," Carter replied. "He won't be the last." McCoy studied her for a moment. "No, I don't imagine he will be." He gestured toward the mountains visible in the distance. "Tell me, what do you think about 3827 meters now? Still impossible?" Carter considered the question seriously. With standard equipment and conventional training, yes, still impossible. But you wouldn't have asked if there wasn't something more to Project Olympus. "Indeed," McCoy almost smiled. "Report to Hargrove as ordered. Pack for desert conditions. And Carter." He paused, his expression grave. "Trust no one. Not even me. Not completely." The warning sent a chill through her. "Because of Volkov. Because of what Olympus truly is," McCoy answered cryptically. "This isn't just about a long-range shot or a rogue former KGB operative. It's about changing the nature of warfare itself." As McCoy walked away, Carter felt the weight of his words settling on her shoulders. Something much larger than she had imagined was unfolding. Her father's death. Volkov's reemergence, Project Olympus, all connected by invisible threads she was only beginning to perceive. She disassembled her rifle methodically, each movement automatic after years of practice. As she packed away the components, a flicker of movement caught her eye, a brief glint of light from the tree line at the edge of the range. The kind of reflection that might come from a scope lens. Carter froze her senses, instantly alert. She scanned the distant trees carefully, but whatever she had seen was gone. Perhaps it had been nothing, a trick of the light, a ranger with binoculars, a bird watcher. But her instincts told her otherwise. Someone had been watching, and somehow she knew with cold certainty it wasn't anyone from Fort Bragg. The game had already begun. The Nevada desert stretched before Carter like an alien landscape, endless waves of sand and rock, beneath a sky so vast and blue it seemed unreal after the confined spaces of Fort Bragg. Heat rippled from the ground, creating mirages that danced on the horizon. In the distance, jagged mountains rose against the sky, their peaks sharp as broken teeth. Carter stood on the tarmac of the small airfield where the military transport had deposited her and 4 others. The sun beat down mercilessly already, pushing the temperature past 90 degrees, despite the early hour. She adjusted her sunglasses and hefted her gear, scanning her surroundings with practiced precision. No visible markings indicated where they were. No signs, no flags, nothing to suggest this facility existed on any official map. Just a small collection of low buildings, shimmering in the distance, surrounded by a perimeter fence topped with razor wire. "Welcome to nowhere," a voice said beside her. Carter turned to find Dr. Lisa Wong, the DARPA scientist from the range demonstration, shielding her eyes against the glare. Unlike the others, Wong wore civilian clothes, khaki pants, and a light button-up shirt that seemed incongruously formal for the desert setting. "Is that the official designation?" Carter asked. Wong almost smiled. "Officially, this place doesn't exist. The land is listed as a weapons testing range, restricted access. What happens here stays classified at levels most Pentagon officials don't know about." A military Humvee approached, dust billowing behind it. It pulled up alongside the small group, and a man in desert camouflage stepped out. Captain Michael Roberts was in his early 40s, with the lean, hard look of someone who spent most of his life in harsh conditions. Deep lines framed his eyes, the mark of years squinting through scopes in bright environments. "Gear in the back," he called out, his voice carrying the slight drawl of the American Southwest. "We're on a schedule." As Carter loaded her equipment into the vehicle, she noted Morrison standing apart from the group, speaking in low tones on a satellite phone. Their eyes met briefly, and his expression hardened before he turned away. Whatever game he was playing, it had followed them to Nevada. The ride to the facility took 20 minutes across rough terrain. No one spoke. Carter used the time to observe her companions. Besides Wong and Morrison, there was Sergeant David Miller, a weapons specialist she recognized from Fort Bragg, though they had never worked together directly. He was younger than the others, perhaps 30, with quick, nervous eyes that constantly scanned their surroundings. Captain Roberts drove with the casual confidence of someone who knew every inch of the terrain. Occasionally, he would glance in the rearview mirror, his gaze lingering on Carter with what seemed like curiosity mixed with skepticism. As they approached the compound, Carter noticed a series of range flags placed at intervals stretching far into the desert. They fluttered in the hot breeze, marking distances she could only estimate. The nearest appeared to be at standard range increments, 500 meters, 1,000 meters. But they continued far beyond, becoming tiny specks in the distance that must have been several kilometers away. The Humvee passed through a checkpoint where armed guards verified their identifications before allowing them to proceed. The compound itself was surprisingly extensive, a main building constructed of reinforced concrete several smaller outbuildings, and what looked like an underground bunker entrance. "Home sweet home," Roberts announced as he parked. "Grab your gear and report to the main briefing room. 5 minutes." Inside the building was a stark contrast to the brutal desert outside, cool, dim, and humming with technology. The walls were lined with monitors displaying weather data, ballistic calculations, and satellite imagery. At the center of the main room stood a large holographic display, currently showing a three-dimensional rendering of what appeared to be a custom rifle system. McCoy was already there, deep in conversation with a man Carter didn't recognize. When he saw the group enter, he broke off and approached them. "Settled in yet?" he asked, his eyes moving over each of them before settling on Carter. "Just arrived," she replied. McCoy nodded. "Good. We don't have time to waste." He gestured toward the holographic display. "Project Olympus officially begins now." For the next hour, McCoy and Wong delivered a briefing that left Carter's mind racing with possibilities and questions. Project Olympus wasn't merely about pushing the boundaries of long-range marksmanship. It was about redefining them entirely. Traditional ballistics suggests that effective targeting beyond 3,000 meters is virtually impossible. Wong explained, manipulating the holographic display to show bullet trajectories. Even with perfect conditions, the variables become too numerous and significant to calculate reliably. Bullet drop alone approaches 30 meters at extreme distances. Add in wind drift, Coriolis effect, atmospheric refraction, and you're essentially firing blind. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in before continuing. But what if we could account for all of these variables in real time? What if we could create a system that constantly adjusts for changing conditions during the bullet's flight path? The hologram shifted to display a rifle unlike any Carter had seen before, sleeker than traditional systems with integrated computer components and a scope that looked more like something from a fighter jet than conventional optics. "This is the XM-2030 Advanced Precision Targeting System," Wong continued, "the culmination of 15 years of DARPA research. It incorporates microprocessor-controlled optics that constantly adjust based on real-time atmospheric data. The scope contains miniaturized LiDAR for precise distance measurement and wind mapping. The onboard ballistic computer can process over 1 million calculations per second." Morrison, who had been standing with his arms crossed, interjected. "So the rifle does all the work. What's the point of the operator then?" Wong turned toward him, her expression cool. "The system enhances the shooter's capabilities, Colonel. It doesn't replace them. Even with all this technology, you still need someone who understands the fundamental physics, who can interpret the data correctly, and who possesses the physical discipline to execute the shot perfectly." McCoy stepped forward. "Which brings us to why you're all here. This isn't just about the technology. It's about finding the right person to use it. Someone whose instincts and abilities can push this system to its absolute limits." His gaze settled on Carter again. 3,827 meters isn't a random number. It's a specific operational requirement based on intelligence regarding Volkov's capabilities. We believe he's developed a similar system, possibly with technology stolen from earlier iterations of our research, and he's training operators to use it. Carter processed this information carefully. "So this is a race." "More than that," McCoy replied grimly. "It's an arms race with potentially global implications. Long-range precision targeting at these distances changes the strategic landscape. Imagine being able to eliminate high-value targets from positions so distant they're effectively untraceable. No risk of capture, minimal risk of detection." Morrison laughed without humor. "You're talking about a fantasy. Even with this fancy toy, you're still dealing with physics. Bullets don't magically ignore wind or gravity just because you have a computer helping you aim." "That's why we're here, isn't it?" Carter said. To prove it's not a fantasy. McCoy nodded. Exactly. Starting tomorrow, you'll begin training with the XM-2030. Captain Roberts will oversee the physical training regimen. Dr. Wong will handle the technical aspects. I'll be working with you on the more specialized techniques. Carter noted how carefully he avoided mentioning Morrison's role. The tension in the room was palpable. As if reading her thoughts, McCoy added, Colonel Morrison will be serving as security liaison and observer for Joint Special Operations Command. His expertise in field operations will be valuable as we develop tactical applications. Morrison's expression remained neutral, but his eyes hardened. Whatever his official designation, Carter suspected his true purpose was to find any reason to shut the project down, or at least ensure she wasn't the one selected to move it forward. Questions, McCoy asked, looking around the room. Miller raised his hand. Sir, what's the timeline for operational readiness? 30 days, McCoy replied. A murmur ran through the group. 30 days to master a revolutionary weapons system and achieve what most considered ballistically impossible. That's not realistic, Morrison stated flatly. Even with conventional systems, training a sniper to operate effectively at extreme ranges takes months, if not years. We don't have months, McCoy said, his tone brooking no argument. Intelligence suggests Volkov's group is preparing for an operation within the next 60 days. We need to be ready before then. The briefing concluded, and the group dispersed to their assigned quarters. Carter found herself in a sparse room containing nothing but a bed, a desk, and a small bathroom. She unpacked methodically, arranging her personal gear with the same precision she applied to everything in her life. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find McCoy standing in the hallway. Walk with me, he said simply. They moved through the facility in silence until they reached an exit leading to a small courtyard. The desert evening was beginning to settle the brutal heat of day, giving way to a cooler, still warm dusk. The sky had turned a deep purple blue, streaked with orange and gold near the horizon. McCoy produced a battered metal case from his pocket and extracted a cigar, which he lit with deliberate care. He didn't offer one to Carter, seeming to know she wouldn't accept. I served with your father, did you know that? He said finally, exhaling a plume of smoke that drifted away on the desert breeze. Carter stiffened. No, you didn't mention that. It was brief. Operation Urgent Fury, Grenada, 1983. I was attached to his ranger unit as a sniper. He was a hell of a soldier, saved my life during an ambush outside Point Salines. Carter remained silent, processing this new information. Her father had rarely spoken about his military service, especially his time in Grenada. After that, we went our separate ways, McCoy continued. I stayed in, got recruited into certain programs that don't officially exist. He finished his tour, went back to Montana. McCoy paused, studying the glowing tip of his cigar. At least that's what the official record shows. And the unofficial record, Carter asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Your father became a non-official cover operative. He used his hunting guide business as perfect cover to move across international borders, establish connections in certain circles. During the late 80s and early 90s, he was part of a team tracking Soviet bloc operatives who'd gone off-grid after the wall fell. The desert night seemed to close in around them. Carter had grown up believing her father was simply an ex-ranger who had found peace in the Montana wilderness. The idea that he had been living a double life throughout her childhood was both shocking and somehow not surprising at all. It explained the mysterious phone calls, the occasional unexplained absences, the locked cabinet in his study that she'd been forbidden to open. Volkov was one of his targets, Carter said. It wasn't a question. McCoy nodded. Your father tracked him for years, came close to finding him several times. Then, in 2005, he contacted his handler claiming he had evidence Volkov was not only alive, but operating on U.S. soil. 2 weeks later, he was dead, Carter finished. The pieces were falling into place with terrible clarity. The hunting accident. A single shot from extreme long range. No shell casing ever recovered. Your father's client, the one who claimed it was an accidental discharge from his own rifle, disappeared 2 days after giving his statement to local police. Never found. Carter felt cold, despite the lingering desert heat. Why wasn't I told I had a right to know? Operational security, McCoy replied, though his tone suggested he didn't entirely agree with the decision. You were 17, grieving. There was also concern that if Volkov knew your father had a daughter, you might become a target as well. Carter processed this, her mind working through the implications. So now, 15 years later, you're telling me, because you need me for Project Olympus, because you think I inherited whatever skills made my father good at hunting men like Volkov. McCoy took another draw on his cigar before answering. Partially, but also because you deserve to know the truth. And because Volkov is back, and this time he's not operating alone. He's training others, building something dangerous. What exactly is he planning? That's what we're trying to figure out. Intelligence is fragmentary, but we know it involves long-range targeting of specific individuals, high-value targets. Carter looked out across the desert where the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. And you think I can stop him? I think you might be the only one who can, McCoy replied. But first, you need to master that system in there. And you need to do it before Morrison finds a way to shut you down. Why does he hate me so much? It can't just be that I'm a woman. McCoy's expression darkened. Morrison served under a commander named Elizabeth Hayes during his first SEAL deployment. By all accounts, she was exceptional, one of the first women to reach that position. During an operation in Yemen, she made a call that Morrison disagreed with. He followed orders, but reluctantly. The mission went bad. 3 men died, including Morrison's best friend. And he blamed her. He's convinced himself that a male commander would have made a different call. Never mind that an investigation cleared her of any negligence. Never mind that she was following intelligence that later proved to have been deliberately falsified by a double agent. Morrison needed someone to blame, and he chose her gender as the problem. Carter understood now. It wasn't just about her, it was about what she represented to a man who had built his entire worldview around a single traumatic experience. He'll never accept me as the operator for this project, she said. No, he won't, McCoy agreed. Which means you'll have to be so good that his opinion becomes irrelevant. The next morning began before dawn. Carter reported to the training range where Captain Roberts was waiting, the XM-2030 laid out on a table before him. First things first, he said without preamble. Forget everything you think you know about long-range shooting. This system operates on different principles. For the next hour, Roberts walked her through the basics of the new rifle. Despite its advanced technology, the fundamentals remained the same: breath control, trigger discipline, proper positioning. The differences became apparent when they moved to the targeting system. The scope doesn't just magnify, Roberts explained. It creates a composite image based on multiple data streams. What you're seeing is partly optical, partly digital enhancement, and partly predictive modeling. Carter peered through the scope, adjusting to the heads-up display that overlaid the image with a stream of constantly updating data, wind speed and direction, at multiple points along the bullet's trajectory. Temperature gradients, humidity, barometric pressure, and a host of other variables she had never been able to measure in real time before. It's overwhelming at first, Roberts acknowledged. The trick is learning which data points matter most for different conditions. The computer helps, but it can't replace human judgment. They began with relatively close targets. 1,000 meters a distance, Carter could hit blindfolded with a standard rifle. The purpose wasn't accuracy, but familiarization with the system. By midday, they had progressed to 2,000 meters, and Carter was beginning to appreciate the XM-2030's capabilities. The rifle itself was a marvel of engineering, lighter than traditional sniper systems, despite its integrated technology with reduced recoil and a custom-designed cartridge that maintained stability at extreme distances. But it was the targeting system that truly set it apart. In conventional shooting, you make your calculations, dial in your adjustments, and hope nothing changes between when you pull the trigger and when the bullet reaches the target, Roberts explained. With this system, you're getting real-time updates throughout the bullet's flight path. Carter nodded. It was revolutionary, like having a spotter ballistics calculator and weather station all integrated into one system, constantly updating as conditions changed. They broke for lunch, and Carter found herself sitting alone in the facility's small cafeteria, reviewing notes she had made during the morning session. Her solitude didn't last long. Morrison slid into the seat across from her, his tray clattering against the table. Enjoying the new toy, Carter met his gaze evenly. It's an impressive system. It's a crutch, Morrison countered. Real snipers don't need computers to tell them how to shoot. They understand their weapon, the environment, the target. They feel it. And you think I don't? Morrison leaned forward. I think you're a technician, not a warrior. You can hit targets on a range all day long, but when it comes to taking a human life at extreme distance, watching them through your scope for hours, maybe days, studying their patterns, then making the call to end their existence, that takes something you don't have. Carter set down her pen. And what exactly is that, Colonel? The killer instinct, the willingness to play God. His eyes bored into hers. I've read your combat reports. 18 confirmed kills, all clean, all professional, but all in support roles, never as the primary shooter on high-value targets. She remained silent, waiting for him to reach his point. You hesitated once, Morrison continued. Kandahar Province, 2011. You had a shot at a Taliban bomb maker. Conditions were ideal. But you waited an extra 12 seconds before taking the shot. Why, Carter remembered the moment perfectly. The target had unexpectedly picked up a child, a young boy, perhaps 5 or 6. She had waited until he set the child down before taking the shot. You've done your homework, she acknowledged. But you've misinterpreted the data. I didn't hesitate because I was afraid to take the shot. I adjusted to changing circumstances to avoid collateral damage. And what if those 12 seconds had cost American lives? What if he had spotted your position in that time? But he didn't, Carter replied calmly. And no collateral damage occurred. Mission accomplished. Morrison's expression hardened. Volkov wouldn't have waited. That's the difference between operators like you and real killers like him. He understands that sometimes collateral damage is the price of success. If that's your definition of a real killer, then you're right, I'm not one. And I don't want to be. Morrison leaned back, something like satisfaction in his eyes. And that, Sergeant Carter, is why you'll fail when it really counts. Because Volkov won't hesitate. Not for a second. He stood, leaving his barely touched lunch on the table. Enjoy your afternoon session. I hear McCoy has something special planned for you. As Morrison walked away, Carter considered his words. Was he right? Would her unwillingness to accept collateral damage become a liability when facing someone like Volkov? Or was that very restraint what separated professionals from murderers? She didn't have long to contemplate the question. McCoy appeared at her table, his expression grim. "Time for the real training to begin," he said without preamble. "Meet me at Range Complex B in 15 minutes. Range Complex B turned out to be a sprawling facility built into the side of a distant mesa. As Carter approached, she noted the extensive security multiple checkpoints, biometric scanners, and armed guards who verified her credentials at each stage. Whatever happened here was classified well beyond the main compound's already stringent secrecy. McCoy was waiting for her in what appeared to be a climate-controlled shooting range, though it was unlike any she had seen before. Instead of conventional targets, the space was dominated by a massive screen spanning the entire far wall. The floor was mounted on hydraulic systems that could apparently adjust its angle and stability. "Welcome to the HYN system," McCoy said. "High-fidelity, adaptive dynamic environment simulator. The most advanced sniper training facility in existence." Carter examined the room with professional interest. "Virtual training." "Far beyond that," McCoy replied. "This system doesn't just simulate targets and environments, it recreates the exact physical conditions you'd face in the field. Temperature, humidity, wind patterns, even the way the platform beneath you shifts with your breathing or heartbeat." He gestured toward a rack where the XM-2030 was mounted. "The rifle interfaces directly with the system. The recoil, the bullet trajectory, it's all physically accurate. But the real value is in the scenarios." With a few commands on a nearby console, the screen came to life, displaying a hyper-realistic mountain range. Carter recognized the Hindu Kush from her deployments in Afghanistan. "This particular scenario is based on an actual operation from 2011, McCoy explained. A Taliban commander was moving between compounds in the Korengal Valley. A Marine sniper team had been in position for 3 days waiting for a clean shot. When it finally came, the distance was 614 meters, at that time nearly a record. The scene shifted perspective, as if viewed through a sniper's scope. Carter could see a small figure moving between buildings in a distant village. "The Marines took the shot successfully," McCoy continued. "But what if the distance had been greater? What if conditions had been worse?" With another command, he adjusted the scenario. The perspective pulled back the village, now appearing much smaller, more distant. "Same target, but now you're at 3,850 meters. Wind is gusting to 25 mph. There's a temperature gradient of 15 degrees between your position and the target. You have 1 shot." Carter moved to the rifle, settling into position behind it. The system felt real, the weight of the weapon, the texture of the stock against her cheek. Through the scope, she could see the digital rendering of the target, along with all the environmental data provided by the XM-2030's systems. "This isn't just about hitting a target," McCoy said as she prepared. "It's about understanding the psychological aspects of extreme long-range engagement. At these distances, you're not just shooting at a person. You're altering events that are happening in what amounts to a different world from the one you're in. The bullet will travel for over 7 seconds. The target might move, conditions might change, and you have to anticipate all of it." Carter focused, running through her mental checklist. The XM-2030 system provided the raw data, but interpreting it, feeling the shot that was still human domain. She made subtle adjustments, aligning the advanced reticle with her target, accounting for the massive bullet drop at this distance. "In the real world, at this range, you might spend hours preparing for a single shot," McCoy continued. "You'd study the target's patterns, the environmental cycles. You'd make dozens of calculations. But sometimes you don't have that luxury. Sometimes you have seconds to decide." Carter tuned out his voice, entering the state of focused calm she had perfected over years of practice. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. The world narrowed to the image in her scope, the feel of the trigger against her finger, and the invisible path her bullet would travel. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. On the screen, she watched as the simulated bullet traveled its long arc, affected by all the environmental factors the system was modeling in real time. 7.2 seconds later, the digital figure crumpled. "Hit," the system announced. "Target neutralized." McCoy said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, "Most operators miss their first attempt in this scenario. The complexity overwhelms them." Carter rose from the rifle. "It's not fundamentally different from conventional shooting. Just more variables, greater distances. That's what makes you unique, Carter. You don't see the impossibility. You just see the problem to be solved." McCoy approached the console again. "Let's try something more challenging." For the next 3 hours, McCoy ran her through increasingly difficult scenarios: greater distances, worse conditions, moving targets, limited visibility. The Hades system recreated each with uncanny realism, down to the way heat mirages distorted the image at extreme ranges. By the end, Carter was mentally exhausted but exhilarated. The XM-2030 combined with the Hades training system opened possibilities she had previously considered purely theoretical. Shots at ranges beyond 3,500 meters weren't just possible with the right conditions and preparation, they were reproducible. As they were wrapping up, Dr. Wong entered the facility carrying a tablet computer. She nodded to Carter before addressing McCoy. "The latest intelligence just came in," she said, her voice tense. "You need to see this." McCoy reviewed the information on the tablet, his expression darkening. "How reliable is the source?" "Multiple confirmations. It's him." McCoy handed the tablet to Carter. On the screen was a grainy photograph taken from what appeared to be surveillance footage. It showed a man in his late 50s or early 60s, his face partly obscured, but still recognizable from the briefing materials. Ivan Volkov. "This was taken 3 days ago at a private airfield outside Minsk," Wong explained. "He was meeting with representatives from a group we've been tracking, former military and intelligence operatives from various countries who've gone mercenary." "The timing's accelerating," McCoy said grimly. "Intelligence suggests they're planning something within 30 days, not 60, as we initially thought." Carter studied the image carefully. "What's in the case he's carrying?" Wong zoomed in on a metal attaché case visible in Volkov's hand. "We believe it contains technical specifications for his version of the targeting system, possibly prototype components." "So he's not just training operators," Carter said. "He's selling the technology to people who intend to use it," McCoy confirmed. "High-value targeting is a lucrative business. Political assassinations, corporate elimination, taking out military or intelligence leadership, all from distances that make detection nearly impossible." The implications were clear. If Volkov succeeded in distributing this technology to mercenary groups or terrorist organizations, the strategic balance would shift dramatically. No high-value target would be truly safe, no matter how well protected. "We need to accelerate the training timeline," McCoy decided. "Starting tomorrow, we move to advanced protocols. Carter, you'll work with the system in field conditions. Real ammunition, real targets, extreme distances." "I'm ready," she said. "No, you're not," McCoy replied bluntly. "But you will be, because you have to be." As they exited the Hades facility, Carter noticed Morrison waiting outside, his arms crossed. He had obviously been there for some time. "Productive session?" he asked, his tone making it clear he already knew the answer. McCoy regarded him coolly. "Colonel Morrison, I don't recall seeing you on the access list for this facility. Joint Special Operations Command has oversight authority for all aspects of Project Olympus," Morrison replied smoothly. "I'm simply fulfilling my responsibility to observe and report." Report to whom exactly? McCoy asked. Morrison smiled thinly. That's classified Master Sergeant. Above your pay grade. The tension between the two men was palpable. Carter remained silent, observing their interaction with careful attention. If you'll excuse us, McCoy said finally, we have a briefing to prepare. As they walked away, Carter glanced back to see Morrison watching them, his expression unreadable. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his presence than simple institutional sexism or personal grudges. He seemed too invested, too determined to maintain oversight of every aspect of the project. He's not just here to make trouble for me, is he? She asked McCoy when they were out of earshot. No, McCoy admitted. Morrison represents interests within the military and intelligence community who are deeply concerned about the implications of this technology. Some believe it should never be deployed, that the potential for misuse is too great. And what do you believe? McCoy's expression was grim. I believe that once Pandora's box is opened, you can't close it again. Volkov already has this technology. The question now isn't whether such weapons should exist, but who will control them. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of intensive training. Each day followed a punishing schedule morning sessions with Captain Roberts on the practical aspects of the XM-2030 system afternoons, with Dr. Wong learning its technical specifications and capabilities, and evenings with McCoy in the Hades simulator pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Carter progressed rapidly, her natural talent amplified by the advanced technology. By the end of the first week, she was consistently hitting targets at 3,000 meters in variable conditions. By the end of the second, she had pushed to 3,500 meters with 90% accuracy. Morrison observed much of her training, his presence a constant reminder of the scrutiny she was under. Occasionally, he would interject with criticisms or suggestions most designed to undermine her confidence. Carter ignored him, focusing instead on the task at hand with single-minded determination. On the morning of the 15th day, Carter arrived at the range to find McCoy waiting with unexpected news. We're moving to the next phase, he announced. Live fire at extreme range. The real test. They drove deep into the desert, far beyond the main compound, to a remote firing position situated on a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of empty terrain. Heat waves rippled across the landscape, distorting the view of distant mountains. Target is at 3,800 meters, McCoy informed her, pointing to a barely visible steel plate positioned against a distant hillside. Conditions are about as good as they get in this environment, but that's still wind gusting to 15 mph temperature differential of about 20 degrees from here to target, and enough mirage effect to make optical sighting challenging. Carter set up the XM-2030, going through her preparation with methodical precision. The system's sensors came online, feeding environmental data to the targeting computer. Through the advanced scope, she could see the target more clearly, along with a wealth of information about the conditions affecting her shot. As she settled into position, she became aware of vehicles arriving behind her. Morrison emerged from one, accompanied by what appeared to be senior military officials, a general, and several colonels Carter didn't recognize. Dr. Wong exited another vehicle along with a team of technical specialists carrying monitoring equipment. Quite the audience, Carter remarked quietly to McCoy. Joint Chiefs wanted confirmation of the system's capabilities, McCoy replied. This is as much a demonstration as it is a training exercise. Morrison approached the general at his side. Sergeant Carter, this is General Lawrence from Strategic Capabilities Office. He's here to observe the test. The general nodded to Carter. Sergeant, Colonel Morrison has been keeping us informed of your progress. Impressive if the reports are accurate. Thank you, sir, Carter replied, detecting the note of skepticism in his voice. The parameters for today's test have been adjusted, Morrison announced. You'll be attempting shots at 3,800, 3,900, and 4,000 meters. 3 rounds per distance. Success requires 2 hits out of 3 at each range. Carter glanced at McCoy, who seemed unsurprised by the change. This had been planned, a deliberate escalation of the difficulty to test her limits. Conditions are variable, Morrison continued. We'll be activating the range's environmental modifiers between distances, wind generators, thermal emitters, simulating worst-case scenarios. Understood, Carter acknowledged, returning her attention to her preparation. As the officials moved to an observation position, McCoy leaned close to Carter. "They're expecting you to fail," he said quietly. "Especially at 4,000 meters. No one has ever achieved consistent accuracy at that range, not even with this system." Carter made a final adjustment to her scope. "Then they're about to be disappointed." The test began. Carter's first shot at 3,800 meters struck true, the impact visible through high-powered spotting scopes. Her second missed by inches, a sudden gust of wind she hadn't fully compensated for. Her third hit. At 3,900 meters, the challenge increased significantly. The environmental modifiers activated, creating artificial crosswinds and heat distortions that made the target waver like a mirage. Carter adjusted, relying on both the XM-2030's advanced systems and her own instincts. 2 hits, 1 miss. Then came 4,000 meters a distance that pushed against the very limits of ballistic possibility. The officials watched intently as Carter prepared, some openly skeptical, others merely curious. Morrison stood with his arms crossed, a faint smile suggesting he anticipated her failure. Carter tuned them all out. Her world narrowed to the data in her scope, the feel of the rifle against her shoulder, the rhythm of her breathing. The first shot missed wide left, caught by a wind shear the sensors hadn't fully detected. She adjusted, recalculating, feeling the pattern of the air currents with an intuition that went beyond technology. Her second shot hit the edge of the target, technically a success, but not the decisive strike she wanted. For her final attempt, she paused longer, waiting for the perfect moment when all variables aligned. When she finally squeezed the trigger, she knew before the bullet even reached its target that she had succeeded. The impact was dead center. A murmur ran through the observers. General Lawrence consulted with his technical advisors, reviewing the data from the monitoring equipment. Even Morrison seemed momentarily taken aback. "Impressive shooting, Sergeant," the general acknowledged, approaching Carter as she secured the rifle. "The system obviously works, as advertised." "The system is only as good as its operators, sir," McCoy interjected. "What you've just witnessed goes beyond technology." The general nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps." He turned to Morrison. "We'll want a full report by UO-800 tomorrow. The Joint Chiefs will be very interested in these results." As the officials departed, Morrison lingered, his earlier surprise now replaced by his usual disdain. "Enjoy your moment, Carter, but hitting steel plates in the desert isn't the same as taking out a living, breathing target who's actively trying not to be killed." "Is there a point to this, Colonel?" Carter asked, her patience wearing thin. "Just reminding you that when the real test comes, and it will, all your fancy technology and perfect range scores won't matter if you hesitate, if you let conscience cloud your judgment." Before Carter could respond, a series of sharp cracks echoed across the desert. Not the report of a rifle, but something else, the distinctive sound of incoming fire. "Sniper!" McCoy shouted, diving for cover behind the nearest vehicle. Carter dropped instinctively, scanning the distant ridgelines for the source of the attack. Through the dust, kicked up by bullets striking around them, she caught a glimpse of movement approximately 2,000 meters away, a sniper team positioned on an overlooking ridge. Morrison had taken cover behind the same vehicle as Carter, his sidearm drawn. How the hell did they find this location? He demanded, his voice tense. This is a black site. Carter didn't waste time speculating. She crawled back to the XM-2030, which lay where she had left it. Another shot cracked past her close enough that she felt the displacement of air. "Carter, get down!" Morrison shouted. "That's a direct line of fire!" She ignored him, reaching the rifle and dragging it into a position where she could acquire the target. Through the scope, she located the enemy sniper, a figure in desert camouflage partially concealed behind rocks. At this distance, she couldn't make out any identifying features, but the professional positioning told her this was no random attacker. "I've got them," she called out. "One shooter, one spotter, North Ridge 2, 100 meters. "Can you take the shot?" McCoy asked from his position. Carter was already adjusting her scope, the XM-2030's systems rapidly calculating the necessary adjustments. "Affirmative." She lined up the shot, controlling her breathing, despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. The crosshairs settled on the partially exposed figure of the enemy sniper. One squeeze of the trigger, and the threat would be eliminated. But in that moment, something made her hesitate. The positioning, the technique, it was familiar. Too familiar. "Something's wrong," she said more to herself than the others. Another shot from the enemy position kicked up sand near McCoy's position, forcing him to shift cover. "Take the shot, Carter," Morrison shouted. "What are you waiting for?" Carter zoomed in further, focusing on what little she could see of the attacker. A glint of metal caught her attention, something on the shooter's equipment that reflected the sun briefly. "It's a setup," she realized suddenly. "The shooter's using Russian-made equipment, but the positioning is pure U.S. Marine sniper doctrine. No Russian or mercenary would use that approach." Morrison's expression changed, something like alarm flashing across his features. "That's irrelevant. Take the shot before they kill someone." But Carter was already rising to her feet, stepping out from behind cover. "Hold fire!" she shouted toward the ridge, waving her arms. "Friendly position! Hold fire!" "Carter, get down!" McCoy yelled, lunging toward her. The shooting stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence, Carter turned to Morrison, whose face had gone pale. "You knew," she said, the pieces falling into place. "This was a test. Your test." Morrison's expression confirmed her suspicion. "Standard protocol for vetting specialized operators. Live fire stress assessment." McCoy had moved to Carter's side, his expression thunderous. "Without authorization, you put lives at risk for a psychological evaluation." "I had full authorization," Morrison replied coldly, "from General Lawrence himself. We needed to know if Sergeant Carter would hesitate under genuine threat conditions." He looked at Carter, his contempt obvious. "And she did." "I didn't hesitate," Carter countered. "I recognize the inconsistency. No genuine enemy would have used those tactics or that position. It was textbook Marine Corps deliberately making themselves just visible enough to be spotted." A radio on Morrison's belt crackled to life. "Control to observer. Assessment complete. Target recognized, friendly indicators. Exercise terminated." The confirmation only seemed to deepen Morrison's displeasure. "You got lucky with your analysis, Carter. In a real combat situation," she interrupted, "making the correct identification would have prevented friendly fire and potentially saved lives. That's not luck. That's training and judgment." McCoy's expression had shifted from anger to something like grim satisfaction. "She's right, Colonel. She passed your test, just not in the way you expected. A good sniper doesn't just shoot targets. They make correct assessments under pressure." Morrison looked as if he might argue further, but instead turned away, speaking tersely into his radio. The figures on the distant ridge were now standing clearly visible as they packed up their equipment. As they prepared to return to the compound, Carter found herself reviewing Morrison's test with professional detachment. It had been cleverly designed, a genuine threat that forced an immediate decision under life or death conditions. Most operators would have taken the shot without hesitation, eliminating what appeared to be an enemy sniper. But something still bothered her about the incident. The timing was too convenient, coming immediately after her successful demonstration for General Lawrence. And Morrison's reaction to her refusal to fire seemed excessively personal beyond the scope of a standard evaluation. As they loaded the equipment into the vehicles, Carter noticed Miller watching her from a distance, his expression unreadable. Throughout the training period, he had remained largely in the background, assisting with equipment maintenance, but rarely engaging directly with the primary team. She made a mental note to watch him more closely. In her experience, it was often the quiet ones who saw and knew the most. That evening, Carter was summoned to McCoy's office. She found him reviewing footage from the day's events, his expression troubled. "Close the door," he said, without looking up. Once she had done so, he activated a device on his desk, a signal jammer she recognized. Whatever he was about to say, he didn't want it recorded or overheard. "Morrison's test wasn't unauthorized," McCoy said without preamble. "But it wasn't entirely official either. General Lawrence approved a stress evaluation, but the specific methodology was Morrison's initiative. He was hoping I'd fail," Carter said. "Or worse, that I'd shoot and kill friendlies disguised as enemies." "Exactly. Either outcome would have given him grounds to remove you from the program." McCoy shut off the footage. "But that's not what concerns me most. What concerns me is how the information about our test location was transmitted. The coordinates for today's exercise were classified. Only 5 people had access to them." Carter did the math quickly. "You, me, Morrison, Wong, and Miller." "Correct. And the communication logs show no outgoing transmissions from the compound that could have conveyed those coordinates to the sniper team." McCoy's expression was grave. "Which means someone provided that information in person or through channels we're not monitoring." "A security breach," Carter said, "or a deliberate leak. Morrison is the obvious suspect given his opposition to your involvement, but it's almost too obvious." McCoy leaned back in his chair. "And there's more. The intelligence we received about Volkov's movements, I've been doing some digging. The sources don't check out. The timing is too convenient." Carter felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night beyond the window. "You think we're being manipulated?" "I think someone wants this project to succeed, but not necessarily for the reasons we've been told." McCoy lowered his voice further, though the jammer should have prevented any eavesdropping. "Project Olympus isn't just about long-range targeting capability. There's another application, something Wong and her team have been developing in parallel." "What kind of application?" "I don't know exactly, but I've seen references to something called Project Icarus in restricted files. Something that takes the targeting system beyond conventional weapons platforms." The implications were disturbing. If the XM-2030's technology could be adapted for other weapon systems, perhaps even orbital platforms or autonomous drones, the strategic implications would be far greater than simply extending a sniper's range. "Who's really behind this, McCoy?" Carter asked. "Who are we working for?" "That," McCoy replied grimly, "is the question that keeps me awake at night." The Nevada desert dawn broke with a violence of color, crimson and gold, streaking across the eastern horizon, casting long shadows across the sand. Ashley Carter stood alone on the compound's observation deck, watching as the first light touched the distant mountains. Her body was still, but her mind raced with the revelations of the previous night. Project Icarus. A security breach. The possibility that Olympus itself was merely a cover for something larger. Sleep had eluded her questions, circling endlessly in her thoughts. The sound of footsteps broke her reverie. Lisa Wong approached two steaming mugs in her hands. She offered one to Carter without a word. "You're up early," Carter said, accepting the coffee. "Never really slept." Wong's face showed the strain of recent days, dark circles beneath her eyes, tension in the corners of her mouth. "After what happened yesterday, the attack Morrison's test, security protocols required a full system audit." Carter studied the scientist over the rim of her mug. Wong had always been professional-focused, but there had been a distance between them, the natural divide between researcher and subject. Now something in her manner suggested a shift. "Find anything interesting?" Carter asked casually. Wong glanced around, confirming they were alone. "Nothing in the official logs, which is precisely the problem. No unauthorized access, no unexplained communications, nothing to explain how those coordinates were transmitted. Unless the breach isn't in the system." "Exactly." Wong lowered her voice. "Someone within the inner circle is operating outside official channels." Carter took a careful sip of her coffee, considering her next words. "McCoy mentioned something called Project Icarus, said it was connected to Olympus." Wong's reaction was almost imperceptible, a slight stiffening, a momentary pause before she regained her composure. "He shouldn't have told you that." "But he did. And now I'm wondering what I'm really training for." Wong was silent for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with an internal decision. Finally she said, "Meet me in Lab 7, 20 minutes. Come alone." She departed without waiting for a response, leaving Carter to wonder if she had just found an ally or another layer of deception. 20 minutes later, Carter approached Lab 7, a small, unmarked facility at the far edge of the compound. Unlike the main research buildings with their constant activity, this structure sat apart, accessible only with the highest security clearance. Wong was waiting outside, keycard in hand. "What I'm about to show you is classified beyond top secret," she said without preamble. "If anyone discovers I've shared this information, my career is over. Possibly my freedom as well. Why risk it? Because after yesterday's incident, I'm not convinced we're on the right side of this anymore." Wong swiped her card through the reader. "And because you deserve to know what you're really part of." The door slid open, revealing a surprisingly small space dominated by computer terminals and a central holographic display. Wong activated the system with a series of commands, and the hologram flickered to life. What appeared was not a rifle or targeting system, but something far more disturbing, a detailed rendering of what appeared to be a satellite platform equipped with a directed energy weapon. "This is Project Icarus," Wong explained, her voice low despite the room's soundproofing. "The true application of the targeting technology you've been training with." Carter studied the hologram, professional interest overriding her alarm. "An orbital weapons platform. More specifically, a kinetic bombardment system. Tungsten rods launched from orbit, guided with unprecedented precision using the same targeting technology as the XM-2030. No explosive payload needed at terminal velocity. The kinetic energy alone creates impact equivalent to a small tactical nuclear weapon, but with no radiation, no fallout." "The ultimate sniper platform," Carter said quietly. "Invisible, untraceable, unstoppable." Wong nodded grimly. "Capable of striking any target on Earth within minutes, with accuracy measured in centimeters, not meters. The XM-2030 program was developed partially as a cover, partially as a testing ground for the targeting systems." The Carter circled the hologram, taking in the implications. "So all this training is to determine if a human operator can achieve the precision necessary to control such a system. AI targeting has proven insufficient for the final stages. There's still a need for human judgment and intuition. The same skills that make an elite sniper effective at extreme ranges translate to the orbital platform. The revelation settled over Carter like a physical weight. She had spent her career believing in the precision of her work, the ability to eliminate genuine threats with minimal collateral damage. This was something else entirely. Not precision, but power. Not targeted elimination, but the threat of annihilation. "Does McCoy know?" she asked. "Not the full extent. He suspects, but his clearance only goes so far." Wong deactivated the hologram. "Very few people know about Icarus. General Lawrence is the military overseer. There's a separate civilian committee with ties to intelligence agencies. And there's a third party involved, a private defense contractor providing critical components. And Volkov. Is he real or just another part of the cover?" "Very real," Wong assured her. "But his role in this is complicated. Our intelligence indicates he's developing similar technology. What we don't know is who he's working for." Initial reports suggested non-state actors, but the resources required for such development point to nation-state backing. Carter processed this information, piecing together a broader picture. So this is about more than preventing assassination technology from reaching terrorists. It's about control of orbital weapons platforms. "A new arms race," Wong confirmed. "Potentially more destabilizing than nuclear proliferation." Carter turned to face the scientist directly. "Why tell me this now? What changed?" "Yesterday's attack. It wasn't just Morrison testing you. I reviewed the data logs from the targeting systems used by the simulated enemy snipers. They were using a rudimentary version of our own technology, something that shouldn't exist outside this facility." The implication was clear. Someone leaked technical specs to the test team. Or the test team wasn't who Morrison claimed they were. Wong's expression darkened. "I no longer believe we're secure here. And I'm not convinced that the chain of command is what it appears to be." Before Carter could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the compound, short, sharp pulses that indicated a security breach. Wong moved to a terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Perimeter sensors triggered on the north side," she reported. "Multiple intrusions." The facility's PA system crackled to life. "All personnel security protocol Alpha. This is not a drill. Repeat, security protocol Alpha." Wong's face paled. "We need to get to the secure bunker. Now." They exited the lab to find the compound in controlled chaos. Security personnel moving with practiced precision toward defensive positions. Research staff being escorted to shelter areas. Carter scanned for familiar faces, spotting Miller running toward the armory. "Miller!" she called out. "What's happening?" He changed direction, jogging toward them. Unidentified force breached the outer perimeter. At least a dozen, maybe more. Well-equipped. "Where's McCoy?" "Command center with Morrison and the security team." "There." The rest of his response was drowned out by a deafening explosion from the north side of the compound. The ground shook and windows shattered in nearby buildings. The attack had begun. "We need weapons," Carter decided. "Miller Armory, now." The three of them moved quickly through the chaos, reaching the armory just as another explosion rocked the compound. Inside, they found Captain Roberts already distributing equipment to security personnel. "Carter," he acknowledged grimly. "Glad you're here. We're undermanned." "What's the situation?" "Professional strike team, military precision. They breached the perimeter with explosive charges and are moving in a standard three-pronged assault pattern." Roberts handed her an M4 carbine and body armor. "They're not here to negotiate." Carter checked the weapon with practiced efficiency. "Any identification?" "Negative. Black tactical gear, no markings. but their equipment is Russian-made, high-end. The implications were obvious. Volkov. Carter turned to Wong. Get to the secure bunker. Your knowledge of Icarus is too valuable. Wong hesitated. The research data. Emergency protocols should have triggered an automatic backup. And wipe, Roberts interrupted. Standard procedure for classified facilities under attack. Another explosion closer this time, followed by the distinctive rattle of automatic weapons fire. The attackers were inside the compound. Go, Carter insisted. We'll hold them here. As Wong departed with an escort of 2 security personnel, Carter turned to Miller. Where would McCoy be now? Either the command center or the emergency evacuation point, Miller replied, checking his own weapon. Depending on the threat assessment. Roberts, the captain considered. Command center first. Morrison would insist on coordinating the defense personally. The 3 of them moved out, navigating through the compound with tactical precision. The sounds of combat grew louder, sporadic gunfire shouted commands, the occasional explosion. Smoke began to fill some corridors, reducing visibility. They encountered the first attacker at the junction leading to the command center, a figure in black tactical gear who appeared suddenly from a side passage. Carter reacted instantly, dropping to one knee and firing a controlled burst. The attacker fell. Russian Spetsnaz tactics, Roberts observed as they moved past the body. But something's off. They reached the command center to find the door ajar, signs of a firefight, evident in bullet holes and blood smears. Inside the scene was grim. 3 security personnel lay dead. Electronic equipment sparked and smoked from bullet impacts. And in the center of the room, Morrison knelt beside McCoy's prone form, applying pressure to a wound in the older man's chest. About time, Morrison growled when he saw them. We're overrun. They hit us with an EMP device. Communications are down, security systems compromised. Carter moved immediately to McCoy's side. The wound was serious. A bullet had penetrated just below his collarbone, and his breathing was labored, his skin ashen. Hang in there, old man, she said quietly. McCoy's eyes focused on her with difficulty. Carter, listen carefully. This isn't what it seems. Save your strength, Morrison interrupted. Medical team is on the way. No time, McCoy insisted, his voice weakening. Carter Volkov isn't... He's not... A coughing fit interrupted him, blood speckling his lips. Carter leaned closer. What about Volkov? McCoy gripped her arm with surprising strength. Trust? No one. The real enemy is... His words faded as his eyes lost focus, his grip slackening. Carter checked his pulse, finding it thready but present. He's alive, but barely, she reported. We need to get him to medical. Morrison nodded. Roberts Miller secure an evacuation route. We'll move him together. As Roberts and Miller moved to the doorway, Carter noticed something odd about Morrison's demeanor. Despite the chaos, despite McCoy's critical condition, he seemed almost calm, controlled, as if the situation, while unexpected, wasn't entirely surprising to him. Who are they, Morrison? She asked bluntly. Really? His eyes met hers, cold and unreadable. Mercenaries working for Volkov. Intelligence warned us this might happen. They want the technology. Strange timing, don't you think? The day after I proved the system works at 4,000 meters. Morrison's expression hardened. What are you implying, Sergeant? Before she could respond, Miller called from the doorway. Route secured. We need to move now. They fashioned a makeshift stretcher and carefully moved McCoy through the compound toward the medical facility. The sounds of combat had shifted, concentrated now on the south side away from their position. Either the attackers had been pushed back, or they were focusing on a different objective. They reached the medical bay to find it in disarray equipment, toppled supplies scattered. A lone medic appeared from a supply closet, startled by their entrance. "We need help," Carter said, indicating McCoy. "Gunshot wound critical." The medic, a young woman whose name tag read Peterson, quickly assessed the situation. "Get him on the table. I'll do what I can, but we're limited here." Most of the medical team evacuated to the bunker with the research staff. As they transferred McCoy to the examination table, a new explosion rocked the building close enough to shower them with dust from the ceiling. "They're targeting this section now," Roberts observed grimly. "We need to move again." Morrison checked his weapon. "Roberts, you and Miller hold this position. Carter with me. We need to reach the secure server room. There's critical data that can't fall into enemy hands." Carter hesitated, reluctant to leave McCoy. "Go," the medic urged. "I'll do what I can for him. You're needed elsewhere." With a final glance at McCoy's pale face, Carter followed Morrison out of the medical bay. They moved through empty corridors, the sounds of fighting now distant and sporadic. "Something's not right," Carter said as they approached the server room. "The attack pattern doesn't make sense. If they're after technology, why target the north side first? All research facilities are south." Morrison didn't slow his pace. "They're professionals, creating diversions, splitting our defensive response. Or they're looking for something specific. Someone specific." They reached the server room door, which required high-level biometric access. Morrison placed his palm on the scanner, and the door slid open. Inside, banks of computers hummed efficiently, apparently untouched by the chaos elsewhere. "Begin the data purge," Morrison ordered, moving to a central terminal. "Authorization code Olympus 7 Delta 9. Carter didn't move. "That's not standard emergency protocol. The purge should have triggered automatically when the attack began." Morrison's fingers paused over the keyboard. "The EMP disrupted the automated systems. We need to do it manually." "But the EMP that somehow affected communications but left these servers untouched." Carter raised her weapon, not pointing it at Morrison, but no longer holding it in a neutral position. "Who are you really working for?" Morrison's expression changed, the mask of professional concern falling away to reveal something colder, more calculated. "You're even better than we expected, Carter. But then your father was exceptional too." The casual mention of her father sent a chill through her. "What do you know about my father?" "More than McCoy told you. More than was ever in any official file." Morrison straightened, no longer pretending to work on the terminal. He wasn't just tracking Volkov. He was working with him, until he decided the operation had gone too far. The revelation hit Carter like a physical blow. "You're lying." "Am I? Why do you think Volkov let you live after killing your father? He could have eliminated you easily, a grieving teenage girl alone in the Montana wilderness. An accident. Another hunting tragedy." Morrison's smile was thin, cruel. "He let you live because he saw potential. The same potential I recognized when your name came up for Project Olympus." Carter's mind raced, processing implications, searching for the truth within Morrison's words. "You're working with Volkov." "Not exactly. Let's say we share certain institutional connections." Morrison moved away from the terminal. His posture relaxed, despite the tension crackling between them. "The Cold War never really ended, Carter. It just went deeper underground. Certain elements within both American and Russian intelligence services realized that the real enemy wasn't each other, but the civilian oversight that constrained them. Project Icarus," Carter said, the pieces falling into place. "It's not about national security, it's about power. Control without accountability." "Precisely. An orbital weapons platform controlled not by governments or treaties, but by those who understand the true nature of global security, beyond politics, beyond public opinion. Morrison's voice took on a fervent quality. Imagine a world where threats are eliminated before they can materialize, where deterrence isn't based on mutually assured destruction, but on surgical precision. With you deciding what constitutes a threat, Carter's grip on her weapon tightened. That's not security. That's tyranny. Morrison shrugged. Semantics. The point is, you've proven the targeting system works at ranges previously thought impossible. You've validated the entire Icarus concept. Your work here is done. The implication was clear. Carter raised her weapon fully now, aiming at Morrison's chest. So, the attack? It's a cleanup operation. Eliminating witnesses, destroying evidence. And creating a narrative, Morrison corrected. Terrorists attack a classified research facility. Tragic loss of life. Project deemed too dangerous to continue. Meanwhile, the real technology gets developed elsewhere beyond scrutiny. With you playing both sides, the loyal officer publicly opposing the project while secretly advancing it. I've always found internal opposition the most effective cover. No one suspects the critic of being the true believer. Morrison's hand moved subtly toward his sidearm. You could still be part of this, Carter. Your skills are extraordinary. We could use someone like you. Like you used my father until he became a liability. Morrison's expression hardened. Your father made his choice, just as you're making yours now. The tension between them stretched taut as a tripwire. Carter knew she should pull the trigger, eliminate the threat Morrison represented. But something held her back. Not hesitation, but calculation. Morrison knew too much. Dead, his secrets died with him. The decision was taken from her when the server room door slid open and Miller appeared, breathing hard. We've got a problem. Roberts is down. Attackers converging on this position. Morrison used the distraction, drawing his sidearm with practiced speed. Carter dove for cover as he fired the bullet, missing her by inches. Miller reacted instantly, firing at Morrison, forcing him to take cover behind server banks. This way, Miller called to Carter, indicating an emergency exit. They retreated through the exit as Morrison's bullets struck the closing door. The narrow passage led to a maintenance corridor, dimly lit by emergency lighting. How did you find us? Carter asked as they moved quickly through the passage. Tracked at your movement through the security system. What's left of it? Miller checked behind them, ensuring they weren't followed. Morrison's compromised. Completely. He's working with whoever's behind the attack. This whole thing is a setup. Miller nodded grimly. Suspected as much when I saw the attacker's formation. Too precise. Too familiar with our defensive protocols. They reached a junction where the passage split in 3 directions. Miller paused, considering. We need to find Wong, Carter decided. She knows everything about Project Icarus. If Morrison gets to her first, secure bunker is this way, Miller indicated the left passage. But we have to assume it's compromised if Morrison has facility access. What about alternate evacuation routes? There must be contingencies. Miller hesitated, then nodded. The motor pool. Underground access tunnel leads directly outside the perimeter. Limited access not on main facility plans. Lead the way. They navigated through increasingly narrow maintenance corridors, the sounds of combat now distant echoes. Carter's mind worked furiously, processing everything she had learned. Morrison's betrayal, her father's connection to Volkov, the true nature of Project Olympus as a cover for something far more sinister. And McCoy. Had he known, had he been part of the deception or another pawn, they reached a heavy steel door marked Maintenance Access Only. Miller swiped a key card and entered a code. The door slid open to reveal a small garage housing several unmarked vehicles, rugged desert transports designed for low visibility and high performance. "We need to find Wong first," Carter insisted. "She could be in danger." Miller shook his head. "Too risky. Compound is overrun. Our best chance is to get out, make contact with legitimate authorities, and tell them that a classified project they've never heard of has been compromised by people they don't know exist." Before Miller could respond, the door they had entered through burst open. Carter spun, weapon raised, but lowered it when she saw Wong stumbling through, supported by the medic Peterson. "Carter?" Wong gasped, clearly in pain. "Thank God!" Carter moved to help them, noting the blood staining Wong's side. "What happened?" "Secure bunker was hit," Peterson explained. "Direct breach. Most of the research team didn't make it." "Morrison?" Carter asked. Wong's expression darkened. "He was there, before the attack, accessing the Icarus data. When the breach occurred, he just walked away, left us to die." Miller had moved to one of the vehicles and was preparing it for departure. "We need to move. Now." Carter helped Wong and Peterson into the transport's rear seats, then took the passenger position as Miller started the engine. The vehicle hummed to life with surprising quietness, electric motors rather than combustion engines. "Tunnel exit is 2 miles, Miller explained as they entered a wide concrete passage. "Comes out in a dry wash 5 miles from the compound. From there we can reach the emergency communication point at Checkpoint Delta." "If it hasn't been compromised too," Carter said. The tunnel stretched ahead, illuminated by widely spaced lights that cast alternating patterns of brightness and shadow. The transport moved swiftly, almost silently, except for the sound of tires on concrete. Wong leaned forward from the back seat, her voice weak but urgent. "Carter, you need to know something about Volkov. That he worked with my father, Morrison already told me. Not just with him, for him." Wong winced as the vehicle hit a rough patch. "Your father wasn't tracking Volkov. He was his handler, codename Artemis. He ran a joint American-Russian program during the late Cold War years, Operation Looking Glass." Carter struggled to process this revelation. "What kind of program?" "Exchange of personnel, deep cover, Russian operatives trained by Americans, Americans trained by Russians, the ultimate infiltration on both sides." It was officially disbanded after the Soviet collapse, but some elements continued unofficially. "And Volkov was one of these exchange operatives," Wong nodded. "One of the most successful. Former KGB trained by your father and others to operate seamlessly within American tactical doctrine. The perfect infiltrator." The pieces were falling into place with terrible clarity. "So when my father died, he wasn't killed because he was tracking Volkov. He was killed because he discovered that elements within both intelligence communities were continuing the program for unauthorized purposes, planning something called the Continuity Initiative. He was going to expose them." The tunnel ahead brightened as they approached the exit. Miller slowed the vehicle, checking a monitor that displayed the exterior through concealed cameras. "Clear outside," he reported. "No sign of pursuit." They emerged into a dry wash, the desert sun momentarily blinding after the dimness of the tunnel. Miller accelerated the transport's specialized tires, finding purchase on the loose sand as they headed away from the compound. "So Morrison is part of this continuity initiative?" Carter asked Wong. "A key player. He was your father's protege in the original Looking Glass operation. When your father decided to blow the whistle, Morrison was the one who gave him up." Carter felt a cold rage building within her. Morrison hadn't just betrayed the project or the country, he had betrayed her father, had been responsible for his death. The personal suddenly became entwined with the professional, her duty as a soldier merging with a daughter's need for justice. Checkpoint Delta is 20 minutes out, Miller reported, navigating the transport through the desert terrain with practiced skill. If we can reach the emergency communication system, we can alert the Pentagon directly, bypass normal channels that might be compromised. Assuming the checkpoint itself isn't compromised, Carter noted, if Morrison has access codes, it's a risk we have to take, Wong said. The alternative is letting Icarus fall into the hands of the Continuity Initiative, giving them the power to strike anywhere on Earth without accountability. The transport crested a rise, giving them a momentary view of the vast desert expanse. In the distance, a plume of dust caught Carter's eye. "We're being followed," she announced. "Single vehicle. Fast." Miller checked the rear display, his expression grim. "Pursuit transport. Same model as ours. Must have tracked us through the tunnel. How long to the checkpoint?" 15 minutes at top speed. They'll overtake us before then." Carter made a quick decision. "Pull over. Find cover. We'll deal with them here." Miller looked doubtful, but complied, guiding the transport behind a large rock formation that would conceal them from the approaching vehicle. Carter checked her weapon. "Wong, Peterson, stay in the transport. Be ready to move quickly if this goes bad." She turned to Miller. "You take left position, I'll take right. Crossfire when they approach." They exited the vehicle and moved to concealed positions, weapons ready. The sound of the approaching transport grew louder, the dust plume visible above the rocks. Carter steadied her breathing, mind clear, focused on the threat. The pursuit vehicle slowed as it approached their position, the driver obviously aware they had stopped. It came to a halt, 30 meters away, partially concealed by terrain. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a voice called out, familiar, carrying easily across the desert air. "Carter, I know you're there. We need to talk." "Morrison." "Seems we're already talking," she called back, not revealing her position. "This situation is more complicated than you understand. You've been manipulated, fed partial truths." "By you?" Morrison's laugh was bitter, carrying on the dry air. "I've done many things I'm not proud of, but right now, I'm trying to prevent a catastrophe. Hard to believe from the man who betrayed my father." A pause. "Is that what Wong told you, that I betrayed Jack Carter?" Another pause. "Ask her who really gave the order. Ask her about her role in the Continuity Initiative." Carter glanced toward the transport where Wong remained hidden. Doubt crept in, not about Morrison's guilt, but about the full picture. Too many fragments, too many contradictions. "Why don't you come out unarmed, and we can discuss it?" she suggested. "I don't think so, but I will offer you a choice. The checkpoint you're heading for, it's not what you think. It's not connected to the Pentagon or legitimate authorities. It's a Continuity Initiative facility. You go there, you are walking into the lion's den." Miller shifted in his position, a subtle movement that caught Carter's attention. His expression had changed, hardened somehow. "He's lying," Miller said, but there was something in his tone, a forced quality, that raised Carter's instincts. Morrison seemed to hear him. "Ask Miller about Operation Longsight. Ask him about his real assignment at Project Olympus." Carter kept her weapon trained on the direction of Morrison's voice, but her attention was now divided, awareness of Miller in her peripheral vision. "What's Operation Longsight?" she asked, directing the question to both men. Miller's hesitation was brief but telling. "Classified." "It's the end game," Morrison called out. "The culmination of the Continuity Initiative. Using Icarus to eliminate key global leaders simultaneously, creating a power vacuum they can fill with their own people. A controlled demolition of the current world order." The claim was outlandish, something from a conspiracy theory rather than reality. Yet Carter had seen enough in the past weeks to know that the line between paranoia and justified suspicion had blurred beyond recognition. "The attack on the compound," she said, thinking aloud. "It wasn't Volkov. It was internal, a purge." "Yes," Morrison confirmed, "eliminating witnesses, creating a cover story. But they didn't get everything they needed. That's why they're pursuing you now. Wong has the final activation codes for Icarus in her head. No electronic record exists." Carter glanced toward Miller, whose posture had subtly shifted, his weapon no longer aimed outward toward the presumed threat, but angled slightly in her direction. "Miller," she questioned quietly. His expression confirmed what she already suspected. "Stand down, Carter. This is bigger than any of us. Your continuity." "I'm a patriot," he countered. "The world is chaotic, dangerous. Traditional power structures are failing. What we're building is stability, security, through assassination and fear, through precise application of force." Miller's weapon was now openly trained on her. "Morrison is the real traitor. He lost his nerve just like your father did. Couldn't see the bigger picture." In that moment, Carter understood the true extent of the web she had been caught in. Not a simple matter of good versus evil, but complex layers of deception and competing agendas. Morrison, the apparent villain, who might be something else entirely. Miller, the quiet support, who had been the true threat. Wong, whose role remained ambiguous at best. And at the center, Project Icarus. Technology with the potential to reshape global power structures for better or worse. Her decision came with crystal clarity. Whatever Morrison's true agenda, whatever Wong's involvement, the immediate threat was clear. Miller was continuity initiative, and he was standing between her and her duty to prevent Icarus from falling into the wrong hands. Carter moved with explosive suddenness, diving sideways as she fired. Miller was good, his reaction almost instantaneous, his return fire missing her by inches as she rolled behind a rock outcropping. The desert erupted in gunfire. From his position, Morrison began firing toward Miller, creating a crossfire that forced the continuity operative to take cover. Carter used the opportunity to work her way closer, moving from rock to rock with practiced efficiency. A cry from the transport drew her attention. Wong had emerged, clutching her side, blood seeping between her fingers. Behind her, Peterson held a sidearm to the scientist's head. "Stand down," Peterson shouted, "or she dies now." The medic's transformation was jarring, the helpful professional now revealed as another continuity operative. Carter froze, calculating options, finding none that guaranteed Wong's safety. The moment of hesitation cost her. Miller emerged from cover, weapon trained on her position. "Drop it, Carter. It's over." From his position, Morrison had a clear view of the standoff. "Carter, take the shot." An impossible choice. If she fired at Miller, Peterson would kill Wong. If she surrendered, Icarus would fall to the continuity initiative. Thousands, perhaps millions of lives hanging in the balance. In that crystallized moment, Carter recalled McCoy's words during training. At extreme distances, you're not just shooting at a person. You're altering events that are happening in what amounts to a different world from the one you're in. This wasn't about making a shot at 4,000 meters. It was about making a decision that would ripple across time and space, affecting countless lives. The ultimate test of a sniper's judgment wasn't technical skill, but the moral clarity to know when to pull the trigger and when not to. The desert gave way to the surreal landscape of Death Valley, a vast depression of salt flats and twisted rock formations, nature's testament to extremes. After hours of driving, they approached what appeared to be an abandoned mining operation nestled against the base of a jagged ridge. The faded sign, barely legible, read, "Prosperity Mine Est, 1953." Morrison pulled his vehicle to a stop 50 meters from the entrance. This is it. Carter surveyed the area through tactical binoculars. No obvious signs of surveillance or security, which made her more suspicious, not less. "How do we know this isn't another trap?" she asked. Morrison gestured toward the mine entrance. "Because if Volkov wanted us dead, we wouldn't have made it this far." They approached cautiously, Wong struggling to walk, despite the field dressing on her wound. The mine entrance led to a tunnel that sloped gently downward before opening into a surprisingly modern facility. Concrete floors, metal walls, LED lighting. It had the unmistakable efficiency of Cold War architecture, utilitarian to its core. At the center of the main chamber stood a man Carter recognized immediately from the photographs. Ivan Volkov. In person, he seemed both more and less than his legend, shorter than she'd imagined his frame, lean rather than imposing. Yet his presence filled the space with a quiet authority that needed no theatrics. His eyes, pale blue and penetrating, fixed on Carter with instant recognition. "Sergeant Ashley Carter," he said, his accent less pronounced than she'd expected. "You have your father's eyes." Carter kept her weapon ready, maintaining distance. "And his aim, apparently." The hint of a smile touched Volkov's weathered face. "Better, I think. Jack never managed 4,000 meters, even with assistance." "You've been watching." "Since Montana. Since the day your father died." Volkov gestured toward a door at the far side of the room. "We should talk privately. There is much you need to know." Carter glanced at Morrison and Wong. Morrison nodded slightly. "Go. I'll keep watch here." The room Volkov led her to was Spartan, a simple desk, 2 chairs and walls lined with outdated communications equipment. On the desk lay a single folder yellowed with age, bearing a faded Cyrillic stamp. "Please sit." Volkov took the chair behind the desk, his movements measured, precise. The movements of a man who had spent a lifetime calculating every action. Carter remained standing. "You killed my father." "No." Volkov's denial was quiet but firm. "I tried to save him." He opened the folder, removing a photograph that he slid across the desk. It showed 2 men, arms around each other's shoulders, standing against a backdrop of snow-covered mountains. One was unmistakably her father, younger than she remembered him. The other was Volkov. "Switzerland, 1992, Volkov explained. "After the Soviet collapse, we were tracking former KGB assets who had gone rogue, selling intelligence to the highest bidder." Carter studied the photograph, the easy camaraderie between the men, impossible to fake. "McCoy said my father was tracking you." A necessary fiction. The truth was too dangerous, even within our own agencies. Volkov's expression softened slightly. "Your father wasn't just my colleague, Ashley. He was my friend, my brother in all but blood." He removed another document from the folder, a faded operation report with both CIA and KGB letterheads classified at the highest levels. Operation Looking Glass wasn't just an exchange program. It was a firewall, a joint American-Russian initiative to ensure neither side could develop certain technologies without the other knowing. "Technologies like Icarus," Volkov nodded. "Precisely. Weapons that could upset the balance of power so dramatically that they threatened global stability. We were the guardians, the last line of defense against our own government's worst impulses." "Then why did my father die?" Carter demanded, the years of unanswered questions hardening her voice. Volkov's eyes clouded with what looked like genuine pain. "Because he discovered that elements within both our intelligence communities were collaborating on something called the Continuity Initiative, a plan to create weapons systems beyond governmental oversight, beyond treaties, beyond accountability." Project Icarus, the first of many. Your father gathered evidence, prepared to expose it all to the proper authorities. Volkov's voice dropped. The night before, he planned to deliver that evidence. I warned him they were coming for him. He refused extraction, said he needed to protect you first. Carter felt a chill run through her. The hunting trip. Not a trip, an escape plan. The client who was supposed to meet you both at the cabin was my operative, tasked with bringing you both to safety. Volkov's weathered face showed a flash of anguish. He arrived too late. The initiative had already struck. If you didn't kill him, who did? The same person who orchestrated everything from the beginning. Volkov looked past her toward the door. The same person who's been manipulating you just as he manipulated your father. The realization crystallized in Carter's mind with terrible clarity. Morrison. Blake Morrison was your father's protege, his most trusted operative, and the Continuity Initiative's most valuable asset. Carter's mind raced, piecing together fragments of truth from the web of lies. But at the range, in the desert, he helped me. Because he needed you, needed your skills to validate the targeting system. Volkov's voice hardened. Morrison has always played all sides. It's how he's survived this long. Before Carter could respond, a muffled gunshot echoed from the main chamber, followed by the distinctive sound of a body hitting concrete. They moved simultaneously, Volkov drawing a weapon from beneath his desk. Carter turning toward the door, her rifle ready. They emerged into the main chamber to find Morrison standing over Wong's body, a pistol with silencer in his hand. She was trying to access the communication system, Morrison said calmly, as if discussing the weather. Probably to alert her initiative handlers. Carter kept her weapon trained on Morrison, doubt clouding her judgment. Wong's lifeless eyes stared at the ceiling, a small entry wound visible at her temple. "Where's Peterson?" Carter demanded. "Secure in the vehicle. Unlike Wong, she still has value. Technical knowledge about Icarus deployment systems." Carter's finger tightened on the trigger. "And what value do I have now, Morrison? Now that you've validated the targeting system?" Morrison looked genuinely surprised. "You're Jack Carter's daughter. The best natural shot I've ever seen. You're not expendable, Ashley. You're the future." "He's lying," Volkov said quietly. "As he has from the beginning." Morrison's expression shifted, the mask of military professionalism giving way to something colder. "The world is changing, Carter. Old loyalties, old borders, they're becoming meaningless. The Continuity Initiative understands what your father never could, that true security comes from strength, from control. Through an orbital weapons platform," Carter said. "Controlled by unelected operatives with no oversight. By people who understand what's at stake." Morrison's voice took on a fervent quality. "Politicians, Parliament's public opinion, they're too slow, too compromised to respond to modern threats. We need a new order." "With you at the top," Volkov interjected. "The same ambition that drove you to betray Jack." Morrison's face hardened. "Jack was weak. When it came to the moment of truth, he couldn't see the bigger picture. Just like McCoy." "And me?" Carter asked. "Am I weak too?" "You're different." Morrison's eyes locked with hers. "You understand discipline, precision, the necessity of hard choices. You can be part of this, Ashley. Help shape a safer world." In that moment, Carter thought of her father not as the intelligence operative she'd just learned about, but as the man she'd known. The man who had taught her to hunt, to shoot, to calculate windage and drop. Who had taught her that taking a life was never easy, never simple, and should never be done without absolute certainty. "You're right about one thing," she said. "I do understand discipline." Her movement was so fluid, so precise, that Morrison didn't even register the threat until it was too late. The bullet struck him center mass, the impact throwing him backward against the wall. His expression showed not pain, but profound surprise, as if he couldn't believe she had made the choice. "I also understand loyalty," Carter added, watching as Morrison slumped to the floor. For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. Then Volkov spoke, his voice carrying a note of grim satisfaction. "Your father would be proud." Carter secured Morrison's weapon before checking his pulse. Weak but present. "He's still alive. Needs medical attention." "Why keep him alive?" Volkov asked. "After everything he's done. Because he has information we need. About Icarus. About the Continuity Initiative." Carter met Volkov's gaze. "And because my father would want justice, not vengeance." Volkov considered this, then nodded. "There's a medical kit in my office. I'll stabilize him." See, as Volkov worked on Morrison, Carter found a secure satellite phone and placed a call to coordinates she found in the safe house's documentation. "Who are you contacting?" Volkov asked, not looking up from his work. "McCoy's emergency protocol. Direct line to his handler at the Pentagon outside normal channels." Carter's voice was steady. "If he survived the compound attack, this will reach him." To her surprise, the call connected almost immediately. "Code in," a terse voice demanded. "Sierra Echo Victor Echo, November." Carter responded, reciting the authentication sequence McCoy had made her memorize. "Olympus has fallen." A pause, then, "Confirmed. Identify yourself." "Sergeant Ashley Carter, United States Marine Corps. I have Ivan Volkov in custody along with Lieutenant Colonel Blake Morrison. Morrison is wounded but stable. Dr. Wong is KIA. Location is Prosperity Mine, Death Valley." Another pause, longer this time. "Understood. Assets inbound. Estimated arrival, 45 minutes. Maintain position." The line went dead. Carter turned to find Volkov watching her, an unreadable expression on his face. "You know they'll take me," he said quietly. "Interrogation. Probably imprisonment. If you're telling the truth about my father, about the Continuity Initiative, you'll cooperate." Volkov's smile was thin. "Truth is rarely simple in our world, Ashley. The initiative exists, yes, but it's not some rogue element. It has sanction from the highest levels of multiple governments, including yours. Then we expose it. All of it. With what evidence Morrison will deny everything. Wong is dead. The compound is surely sanitized by now." Carter considered this, then walked to Morrison's unconscious form and removed a small device from his pocket, a tactical data drive, military grade. "Morrison recorded everything," she said, holding up the drive. "That's his insurance policy. Every black site operative has one." Volkov's eyes widened slightly. "He would have wiped it if he suspected." "He didn't suspect. That's the thing about people like Morrison. They're so convinced of their superiority that they never imagine being outplayed." For the first time, Volkov laughed, a short, genuine sound. "You are definitely Jack's daughter." They waited in silence as the minutes ticked by. Finally, the distant sound of helicopter rotors broke the stillness. "That will be your people," Volkov said. "What happens now?" Carter checked Morrison's restraints one final time before answering. "Now we finish what my father started. We expose the Continuity Initiative. We stop Icarus. And after that," the question hung between them, weighted with unspoken implications. After 15 years of believing Volkov had murdered her father after discovering the truth was far more complex what came next. After that, Carter said, "You tell me everything about my father, the parts I never knew, the man he really was." Volkov nodded a solemn promise in the gesture. "It would be my honor." As the helicopters landed outside, Carter thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Fort Bragg to the Nevada desert to this moment of truth. A journey that had begun with a single question about an impossible shot and ended with the revelation of a conspiracy that spanned decades. The ultimate test of a sniper, she realized, wasn't technical skill or steady hands. It was judgment. Knowing when to take the shot, when to hold, and perhaps, most importantly, which target truly mattered. Outside boots hit the ground, orders were shouted. The official world was arriving with all its protocols and procedures. What would happen next was uncertain. But one thing was clear: the daughter of Jack Artemis Carter had found her true target. And this time, she wouldn't miss. In a military hospital 3 days later, Carter sat beside McCoy's bed. The old sniper had survived his wounds, though his recovery would be long. His weathered face was pale against the white pillows, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "They've confirmed it," Carter told him quietly. "The data on Morrison's drive exposed the entire network. The continuity initiative is being dismantled. Project Icarus has been terminated." McCoy nodded weakly. "And Volkov? In protective custody. He's cooperating fully. Turns out he's been gathering evidence against the initiative for years. Just like your father tried to do." McCoy's voice was raspy but clear. "Jack would be proud of you, Carter, not just for your shooting." Carter smiled, a rare expression for her. "For my judgment." "Exactly." McCoy reached out his hand, finding hers. "So what's next for the woman who made the impossible shot?" Carter looked out the window at the distant mountains, thinking of her father, of all she had learned about him and about herself. "I think," she said carefully, "it's time to teach others what I know, to make sure there are always people who understand that with great skill comes great responsibility." McCoy nodded approval in his eyes. The best snipers aren't just shooters. They're guardians, watching from a distance, making the hard calls, standing between order and chaos. "Just like my father did." "Just like your father did," McCoy agreed. "And just like you will." As she left the hospital, Carter felt a sense of closure that had eluded her since her father's death 15 years before. The truth hadn't simplified his memory. It had complicated it, transformed him from simply a loving father into a man of principle who had given his life to protect the world from a threat few would ever know existed. Now that burden, that legacy had passed to her, the daughter who had inherited not just his aim, but his courage, his judgment, and his unwavering moral compass. The shot at 3,827 meters had been just the beginning.